Across centuries and continents, the same story keeps returning like a shadow at noon. The idea that a woman's body is a ledger and her fidelity, a coin others feel entitled to count. Laws were written with chisels and quills, but they were enforced by fathers and husbands, priests and magistrates, neighbors leaning from windows, whole villages eager for spectacle. Cheating, they called it. Adultery, zina, fornication. Words sharpened into knives. The punishments were not only about crime, they were theater public demonstrations of power, where the body of a woman became the stage. Travel back to ancient Mesopotamia, where clay tablets preserve a cold arithmetic of sign. Under the shadow of ziggurats, the Code of Hammurabi listed penalties with the certainty of stone. In some cases, the river was judge and executioner. Suspected wives might be made to plunge into the water. The current deciding guilt or innocence. The verdict masqueraded as the will of the gods, but it carried the scent of fear and control. If a man was wronged, restitution flowed. If a woman strayed, retribution crashed like floodwater. The husband's honor was a city gate. Crack it, and the whole city felt threatened. Greece clothed its judgments in philosophy, yet practiced humiliation with the same old hands. Adulterous women could be dragged through streets in ritual shaming. Their lovers might face fines or beatings, but the woman bore the deeper stain. Reputation was a currency that determined life itself. Who could speak? Who could inherit? Who could marry? There were officials, the gynecologoi, guardians of women's conduct, who turned private lives into public jurisdiction. A husband could cast a wife out, strip her from her household altars, to return her dowry or keep, it depending on the city's mood and the family's leverage. In plays and myths, desire was a hurricane. In life, it was a contract written in a man's ink. Rome boasted laws like triumphal arches, tall, hard, designed to last. The Lex Julia on adultery turned the private wound into the state's business. A father, upon catching a daughter in the act under his roof, might kill the pair and face no trial. A husband, if he killed the lover, could be excused. Though the wife was meant for courts and punishments more civilized. Exile haunted the horizon, confiscation of property, disgrace that followed like a funeral procession. The Roman ideal of matrona was marble, smooth, cold, unyielding. If she cracked, the fragments cut her first. Across the sands from Rome, in lands braided with caravan routes and oasis towns, noses were lost to rage. Rhinotomy, cutting off a woman's nose, became a gruesome signature in various times and places, a mark of dishonor no veil could hide. The logic was brutal, almost algebraic. You have wronged your husband's face. Your face will bear the cost. It turned individuality into collateral damage, made a woman's most visible feature a field for vengeance. Not all communities prescribed it, not all judges allowed it, but where it was done, it left a line that ran centuries deep. In the texts of late antiquity and the early Middle Ages, sin walked on two legs, but wore a woman's dress. The church thundered about chastity and penance, wrote penitentials like inventory lists of human weakness. A woman caught in adultery might be forced into public penance head shorn, barefoot, wrapped in rough cloth, stationed at the church door through icy dawns, while parishioners stepped around her as if around a fallen beam. Died. She might be denied the sacraments for a time that felt like an eternity when heaven was not metaphor but map. The body pays, the soul waits, the village watches. A husband might keep her or cast her out, but either choice stamped her like wax. In the great households where tapestries softened stone, the rules were no softer. Noble women were locked in their chambers. Estates turned into prisons with better furniture. Some were sent to convents, not for the balm of prayer, but as a velvet cage that never opened. Haircut and habit, repentance demanded by men whose own beds told quieter stories. An abbess might be kind, she might be iron. Either way, a woman found herself caught in vows she did not choose as punishment for a night she could not undo. Meanwhile, in bustling towns where guilds kept time and bells divided the day, punishment built its own choreography. Stocks and pillories made the body a bulletin board. The skimmington or chivalry paraded shame on wagons and donkey-backs women accused of infidelity. Displayed with mocking signs, pots and pans beaten until sound turned to gears. Sometimes the lover marched beside her, sometimes not. Often the sound was enough to shake nails loose from doors, could shake a life apart faster than any legal decree. Even when the punishment stopped, the echo kept ringing. In far-flung corners, where empire's law book did not reach, custom did. A woman might be forced to drink dirty water, to swallow ashes, to circle a village in a necklace of thorns. Women's hair, long, rich, a symbol in nearly every culture, became a handle for disgrace. Head shaving signaled moral bankruptcy like a brand seared into the scalp. Crowds felt entitled to laughter. They called it morality, called it order, called it defense of the family that fortress men built from female obedience. On islands of the North Sea, in the colonies across a colder ocean, Puritan severity carved its letters on wood. The scarlet letter glows in imagination because it was real in spirit, even when the cloth itself was fiction. Public penance required women to stand before congregations with marks or signs declaring their sins. Tongues tasted shame with every Lord's Prayer recited under the gaze of those who pretended not to stare. They were allowed back into pews, but never back into innocence. Because forgiveness was a doctrine, but memory was a neighborhood. In the legal codes of powerful dynasties across East Asia, adultery was not mere scandal. It was statute. In certain periods under the Tang and later the Ming and Qing, an adulterous woman could be beaten with heavy sticks. Her lover likewise, the number of blows counted with terrifying precision. The Kang-heavy wooden boards locked around necks turned people into signposts of their own disgrace. Under the Tokugawa shoguns, in cases of flagrant, caught-in-act adultery, a husband could kill wife and lover without trial. Even where law counseled restraint, tradition sharpened the blade. In some chronicled cases, executions of the guilty pair were staged as lessons blood, writing what ink already had. Korea's Joseon dynasty, Confucian to the bone, guarded lineage like a candle through a storm. Adultery by a married woman could fall under crimes meriting death, or often harsh beatings or banishments that exiled not just the body but the future, the ability to remarry, to raise children with a clean name. It was not only courts that punished, families did too, with cold shoulders, and colder rooms, with arranged divorces that left a woman unmoored in a society where moorings were everything. On the subcontinent, texts and customs intertwined like vines. In some places and times, widows who dared to seek love again risked social annihilation. And wives accused of adultery could face parading on donkeys, faces blackened, bangles shattered, hair hacked off. Communities that prided themselves on honor carried the knife of that word inside their sleeves. A woman's reputation was a pot carried on the head one stumble, and pieces everywhere, uncountable and irreparable. The law might not demand blood, but the village might. Religious law in many traditions put adultery under a blaze of attention whose heat fell unevenly. In interpretations of Islamic jurisprudence, married adulterers, men or women, could face severe penalties, including lashing or stoning. In practice, strict evidentiary rules for eyewitnesses to the act itself made legal conviction rare. But where formal courts were absent or corrupted, rumor worked faster than any tribunal. Communities took matters into their own hands, turning suspicion into punishment long before truth could find its shoes. And in that gap between doctrine and reality, women often stood alone with the sky as their only witness. Africa's vastness held hundreds of customs, but a pattern played again and again, a fine of cattle here. A public humiliation there, a ritual of cleansing meant to heal the breach yet branded the woman as the breach itself. Among some peoples, a woman's lover might pay bride wealth to atone. Among others, the couple might be forced to marry fates, strange as not, tying guilt and future in one rope. The logic enjoyed disguises, but kept the same face. The community as harmony weighed against the woman's heart. Not every punishment cut skin, some cut years. Divorce, though presented as reprieve, often stripped a woman to the bone. Dowry disputed, children claimed by fathers, doors closed. She might end in poverty so tight it squeaked, while the man's life bent a little and then continued. Laws were written to preserve lineage and property. The paper never bled, but the people did. In Europe's early modern courts, the veneer of procedure did not soften the blow. Adultery cases filled dockets with the smell of bedrooms. Judges measured evidence like a tailor measures cloth. Witness statements, intercepted letters, suspicious pregnancies that counted months as if counting stars. Punishments leaned toward the public, whipping at the cart's tail for the poor. Fines and forced charities for the rich, a strange mathematics where money could buy back a slice of respectability. But the stain spread through generations. Children labeled, marriages negotiated with eyes always glancing backward. The street added its own verdicts. Songs lampooned the light woman. Ballads twisted her name into rhyme. Artists etched caricatures where adulterous wives appeared as grotesques, while adulterous men lounged in velvet. In taverns and salons, stories painted the female sinner vividly and the male partner in softer, forgiving tones, as if desire were gravity for him and delinquency for her. Gossip was a punishment that never ended, a chorus without a conductor. Honor, that holy fog, clung to men's reputations and suffocated women's lives. In Mediterranean cultures, in Latin America, in tribal codes across continents, the notion that a woman's perceived infidelity spoiled an entire male lineage gave birth to honor killings, those murders disguised as moral necessities. A brother's hands closing, a father's eyes shut to mercy. Even when outlawed, the ritual persisted in shadows, defended by whispers and the shrug of tradition. The cost of a rumor could be a body lowered into the ground before the truth had even been born. There were places, there were moments, where compassion interrupted the script. Judges who quietly reduced sentences. Priests who pushed penance toward privacy instead of spectacle. Families who chose to close the door and talk rather than open the door and parade. But the exception proved the rule. A woman's fidelity was not her private promise. It was a public property, a fence guarding estates, alliances, and the brittle egos of those who owned neither their doubts nor their desires. The punishments were designed to do more than hurt, as they were designed to warn. Head shaving told every onlooker, "This could be you," pillories reminded, "The town owns your shame." Exile taught, "Step outside prescribed desire, and the world will step outside you." Even mercy wore thorns. Forced marriages, coerced confessions, heavy penances that kept a woman kneeling until her legs forgot walking. Behind them stood a line of men legislators, preachers, patriarchs, reciting the same defense: morality, order, God. Behind the woman stood only the wall. And yet, even in these stormscapes, women found the thin, stubborn threads of survival. Some ran, across city walls at night, through fields silvered with moonlight, into the houses of midwives and widows who understood without asking. Some negotiated dowry, returned in part a discreet relocation, a distant cousin's home. Some turned penance into performance, bowed heads hiding eyes that kept their own counsel. Some wrote letters and burned them, saving the smoke as proof. I existed. I loved. I was punished. Consider the quiet inventions built to catch and correct. Chastity belts rumored more in fascination than fact. Jealousy glasses, locks and watches and chaperones that turned time itself into an instrument. Every device asked the same sick question: how can we prevent a woman from choosing? The answer unspooled across centuries in iron and law, in liturgy and laughter and knives. Even when reforms finally arrived, municipal codes striking adultery from criminal ledgers. Judges refusing to be theologians, they arrived unevenly, long after generations had learned to be watchful of windows, footsteps, and the tilt of neighbors' heads. The past did not disappear. It lay beneath the floorboards, occasionally knocking. The phrases survived: ruined, loose, fallen, words that pretended to describe behavior, but in truth policed belonging. The old punishments went out of fashion the way obsolete currencies still carry portraits of dead kings, faint, familiar, powerful in their ghosts. What makes the story astonishing is not only the brutality, but its symmetry across distances that never met. Cities that never traded a spice shared the same ritual humiliations. Empires that would have burned each other's flags preserved the same double standard in their archives. The obsession with a woman's fidelity was the common tongue of power, spoken by those who understood that controlling love is the back door to controlling life. Imagine the moment before the punishment, the breath held, the eyes seeking a friendly face in the crowd and not finding one, a head lowered for shears, a neck bent for the king, a barefoot step onto cold church stones, a rope scratching at tender skin as a placard is hung around the neck. Imagine the crowd learning the choreography of disdain, children absorbing the lesson, that some errors are unforgivable, and they are almost always the errors of women. Imagine the heartbeat learning to abandon hope early to make the fall shorter. And then, imagine the defiance that survived anyway. The woman who cut her own hair first, turning humiliation into an act of will. The one who laughed in the pillory and turned mockery into mirror. The one who banished, built a life out of scraps and taught her daughters to walk with spines like spears. The one who wrote her story in a margin, in a diary, in a hymn changed by a single note, and smuggled it through time so that another might find it and say, "I see you." History kept the receipts. They are ugly and they are instructive. The punishments for women who cheated were never only about vows. They were about property, inheritance, and the quiet terror patriarchies feel at the idea that desire could outrun decree. Laws tried to weld love to land. Theology tried to tie the soul to the family tree. Communities trained themselves to be both jury and chorus, rehearsing the same song until it felt like truth. But truth stands in the afterlight of cruelty and says, simply, that love cannot be governed by fear without turning into something that is not love at all. In the end, what lingers are the faces, not the statutes, not the sermons, not the drums of shame, but the faces. Eyes rimmed red with salt and sleep, mouths set like doors that will not open again. A lock of hair fallen to the ground like a small, soft animal, a brand cooling to a scar. A woman stepping down from a platform lighter by a measure of dignity that ought never to have been taken. The crowd disperses. The law books close with a snap. The day ends. The woman continues. Because life is stubborn, and so are the people who draw breath inside it. That persistence is the quiet indictment of the centuries. The human heart keeps beating, even when the world builds a scaffold around it. And every beat is a refusal, a verdict whispered under the roar of public sentences. Not yours, not yours, not yours.